In just 48 minutes, Mike Johnson shut down a vote that could have exposed 17 sealed names linked to Jeffrey Epstein. But Jasmine Crockett did not blink. She walked into Congress holding a leaked memo, a coded phrase, and a name so radioactive it made the speaker's jaw lock tight. 45M. The cameras closed in. The air turned electric. Even the walls seemed to listen. What was buried so deep they turned it into a number, and what happened when Jasmine decoded it on live TV. The lights above the oversight chamber didn't glow, they pulsed. Red tally dots blinked atop C-SPAN cameras like warning signals on a battlefield about to ignite. Outside Capitol Hill looked like any other day, but inside the air wasn't air. It was pressure, heavy, invisible, coiled. Mike Johnson leaned back in the speaker's chair, with practiced ease, one palm resting flat against a closed binder labeled Oversight Prep. His suit was crisp, his tie dead center, his expression unreadable until you looked closely. Then you saw the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth, like a man trying not to smirk before the trap door opens. Jasmine Crockett entered without a word. No nod, no smile. Just a slow, deliberate walk toward the witness table, one manila envelope in her left hand, creased but firm like it had been read 100 times and was now ready to burn the building down. She sat, adjusted her mic, and placed the envelope in front of her like a silent dare. Marjorie Taylor Greene whispered something across the table to Matt Gaetz. He chuckled, but neither one was looking at her. They were looking at Johnson, waiting to see if he knew what was coming. He didn't. The hearing hadn't started, but the room already felt like it was breathing through clenched teeth. And that envelope, sealed silent, yellowed at the edges, sat like a loaded weapon no one wanted to acknowledge. What was inside that folder? That even the Speaker of the House didn't dare read aloud. The chair gavelled once. Jasmine didn't wait. She reached into the envelope, pulled out a single page, and held it up so every camera could see the header, Speaker Com Log, internal use only. Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake. It cut straight through the silence like a blade. Delay Epstein vote. Public relations risk linked to 45M. The words hovered in the air, too heavy to fall. Greene sat up straighter. Gaetz blinked. One Republican aide in the back actually dropped their pen. Johnson didn't move, but the skin along his jaw tightened just enough to show he was listening. Jasmine didn't pause. You didn't write his name. You didn't have to. She placed the memo flat on the desk. 45, as in the 45th President of the United States. She looked directly at Johnson. That's the part that interests me. M for MAGA, M for Mike. Or maybe M for a man you didn't want to name. A low hum of whispers started near the press section, then spread like static through the chamber. Johnson tried to speak, but Jasmine raised her hand just slightly, like swatting down a fly that hadn't landed yet. You see, when you redact a name, it's fear. But when you replace it with a code, it's something else. She leaned forward now, just enough for the microphones to catch her breath. That's not caution, that's protection. What kind of power makes a man hide behind a number? Instead of daring to say his name, Mike Johnson finally spoke, his voice cool, but clipped. That memo is unauthenticated. His fingers tapped the wood of his desk once, twice, as if trying to drown out the silence that followed. Jasmine didn't flinch. She slid the paper closer to her mic like a blackjack dealer revealing her final card. Tuesday, 2:12 p.m. Want me to read the printer line? Her eyes didn't leave his, because it came straight from your chief of staff's office. HP LaserJet IP address ending in .78. The document shimmered under the fluorescent lights, suddenly no longer just paper, but a live wire. Johnson's smirk cracked just for a second. A camera caught it. Somewhere in a C-SPAN control room, a producer whispered, Zoom. On Twitter, hashtags exploded, 45M, who is M, delay the vote. In living rooms across America, people stopped mid-sip, mid-bite, mid-breath. Jasmine placed her hand on the envelope again. If this is what you bothered to encode, she said softly, what did you delete? The question didn't land like an accusation. It landed like an X-ray stripping the paint off everything in the room. Across the aisle, a Democratic staffer leaned in, lips parted. 2 seats down, Greene clenched her pen hard enough to crack the plastic. And Johnson, he was blinking now like a man calculating how far the fire had spread. Because codes are for hiding, but deletions are for erasing. If this is what they coded, what else was too dangerous to even leave on the page? Jasmine didn't speak this time. She reached into her folder, tapped the microphone once, and pressed play. A voice, smooth Southern, calculated, filled the chamber. We can't have Epstein resurfacing with 45 back in the news. Delay the vote. Let it die quiet. The room didn't move. Johnson's knuckles stiffened against the oak of the bench. His complexion, once calm and composed, drained like a man who'd just seen his own reflection crack. Jasmine didn't blink. She let the silence stretch. Let the audio keep rolling, just breathing, just background hum long enough for the words to sink like iron into the floor. Behind Johnson, Matt Gaetz leaned in, barely a whisper. They weren't supposed to record that. The phrase didn't sound like surprise. It sounded like fear, a realization that the backroom deal wasn't just whispered in private. It was time-stamped, captured, and now playing on national television. C-SPAN's viewership spiked. Producers mouthed, keep rolling. Twitter imploded. Hashtags burned across the screen like sirens, 45M, leak delay, conspiracy cover-up vote. But Jasmine wasn't reading them. Her eyes were fixed on Johnson, who now looked everywhere but at her. Silence isn't neutral, she finally said. It's a currency, and someone in this building got paid in it. The microphones picked up nothing but breath. Who else knew? Who else heard those words? And said nothing? Jasmine stood, stepped aside, and gestured to the rear doors of the chamber. They opened slowly like a wound peeling back, and in walked Samantha Klein. No title, no security escort. Just a woman in her 30s with a trembling jaw and a stare made of steel. She took the witness seat like someone who had stood too long in silence and finally refused to stay seated in shame. Samantha adjusted the mic with both hands. Her voice cracked only once. I met Jeffrey Epstein when I was 17, she said. He wasn't alone. Her hands gripped the table tighter. I was told by someone in his circle, this donor, he's bulletproof. He's friends with presidents. Don't even think about talking. She looked directly at the GOP side of the room. So I didn't talk. Not then. The chamber fell so quiet even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Mike Johnson no longer blinked. Green was frozen mid-note. A tear streaked down the cheek of a staffer in the back row, and no one dared look away. Jasmine's voice, soft now, almost broke. When you bury evidence, you don't just protect the guilty. You erase the innocent. She placed a hand lightly on Samantha's shoulder, but her eyes never left the speaker's chair. How many daughters had to disappear for someone else's campaign to stay alive? Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She slid a second document across the table, this time with numbers, not names. $320,000, she said. Transferred from Revival American PAC to a super PAC, directly funding Speaker Johnson's media strategy. She turned the page, revealing a highlighted line in a visitor log. Same PAC, same donor. Epstein's Island, April 2002. The oxygen seemed to thin. Johnson's stiffened lips parting like he might object, but nothing came. The marble walls of the chamber, polished and pristine, suddenly felt like they were pressing inward. This is guilt by association, he finally muttered, trying to find footing in a floor that had already crumbled. But Jasmine didn't blink. Or just guilt, she said. Guilt you tried to disassociate from by hiding behind initials and redactions. She held the transfer sheet higher. Tell me, Mr. Speaker, was the donation for your campaign, or was it the price of your silence? A flicker of panic passed across his eyes. Not rage, not denial, recognition. As if for a second he realized she wasn't just questioning him, she was reading the ledger of his political soul. Around them, staffers leaned in pens, still faces locked. Because this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about a transaction, and every transaction has a trail. If this passee funded silence, what else did it buy behind closed doors? Jasmine reached for a third file, thicker, heavier, the corner still scorched from a legal battle, to unseal it. She held it like evidence from a crime scene, then flipped it open to a page soaked in black ink. Paragraphs vanished beneath redactions, but one phrase still bled through. To avoid interference with upcoming campaign messaging. Delay further prosecutorial action. The signature line bore the watermark of DHS. The date August 2019. The administration Trump. The room cracked. Not with noise, but with disbelief. Jasmine tapped one line with the butt of her pen, careful, precise. VIP M45, she read aloud. That's not a typo. That's how you hide someone too powerful to say out loud. Johnson leaned forward, his voice rising. This is conspiracy theory, manufactured smear. He turned toward the committee chair as if seeking refuge from his own echo. Jasmine didn't raise her head. She simply slid another page across the table, an Excel printout time-stamped DHS server log metadata intact. It's not a theory, she said coldly. It's a spreadsheet. The air snapped tight. Aides stopped taking notes. One GOP member quietly turned off their mic. Outside the building, social feeds erupted, screenshots already circling. Inside the chamber was still, except for the blinking red lights of the broadcast feed, pulsing like a countdown. The country was watching. And the evidence wasn't just redacted, it was labeled, coded, and shelved in the name of every voter who never saw it. What does America do when the truth is blacked out in its own name? The silence broke not with argument, but with something heavier. Congressman Hale, 82, shifted in his chair. His voice was dry, like paper rubbed too thin. I remember the vote, he said. 2018. We dismissed Epstein's financial disclosures, thought it was overblown. We were told it wasn't our jurisdiction. His hands folded in his lap, tight and still. We were told to look away. No one interrupted. Even Johnson looked down. Jasmine turned to the congressman, not with fire, but with something sharper. You weren't told, she said quietly. You were trained. The words didn't land like blame. They landed like a diagnosis. She stepped toward him slowly, like approaching a veteran still wearing scars. Trained to ignore discomfort. Trained to protect legacy. Trained to forget what children never could. Hale didn't respond. His eyes fixed on the floor, and for a moment he looked like a man realizing history had been written beneath his feet while he voted with his head turned. The chamber felt older in that moment, heavier. The lights above buzzed faintly, but no one moved. Jasmine's voice again carried without force. This place has a memory. It chooses what to remember. And who, because sometimes a building forgets. Only after someone teaches it how. Who trained Congress to forget what children remembered forever. Jasmine reached into her blazer, slower this time, like pulling something sacred or radioactive. What she unfolded wasn't a file or a fax. It was a photograph, old and worn, the edges curled like it had been hidden too long. She placed it on the table without a word. Samantha sat beside her, eyes locked on the image, as if seeing it for the first time all over again. A pool party, Florida, 1994. Samantha, 16, grinning unaware. Behind her, Jeffrey Epstein in aviators, and just over his shoulder, part obscured by a tiki torch and two lawn chairs, a man mid-laugh, wearing a red baseball cap with white block letters, Make America Great Again. The room didn't breathe. Jasmine didn't look up. She didn't need to say the name. Not when the hat said it louder than any microphone. Not when half the country watching online already had it typed, posted, and screenshotted before Johnson could even reach for his water. The air in the chamber cracked like ice underfoot. One staffer gasped. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Johnson finally looked at the photo and then looked away. Jasmine tapped the picture once softly. She remembers him, she said, but he's never once remembered her. Outside the chamber, chaos erupted. Phones buzzed, screens lit up. Headlines wrote themselves before fact-checkers could keep up. What happens when you recognize someone in a photo, but they never once acknowledged you were there? Johnson broke the silence with scripture. We're all sinners, he said, voice steady, rehearsed. I believe in redemption. I believe in grace. I believe some burdens are meant for the Lord, not for this chamber. He folded his hands like it was Sunday morning, not Thursday afternoon in a federal hearing about a predator protected by power. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her tone didn't shift, but her eyes sharpened. Redemption starts with truth, she said. This isn't a sermon. It's a subpoena. The line hit like a slap, not loud but surgical. The cameras panned wide, catching the unease across the committee table. Johnson blinked once. The choir was gone. All that remained was the witness chair and the weight of unanswered names. He tried again. You're politicizing pain. Jasmine's voice dropped lower. No, you're baptizing it. The word landed heavy. A gasp broke from someone in the second row. One of the aides looked down ashamed. Maybe for him, maybe for themselves. She stepped closer to the table, laid down the still visible photo, the memo, the spreadsheet. This isn't about forgiveness, it's about disclosure, because forgiveness without accountability, that's not faith. That's PR. A single camera zoomed tighter on Johnson's face. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. No psalm, no rebuttal. Because when faith collides with justice, only one walks out without compromise. Which one did Johnson really come here to serve? Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She just slid another document forward, this one stamped with IRS audit markings and bank routing codes. We traced $1.7 million in donations from private religious institutions linked to Ark Encounter, she said, fingers pressing the page like it was radioactive. And those funds didn't go to feeding the poor or building community shelters. They went to the same PACs that blocked this vote 3 times in 12 months. There was a pause. Not the respectful kind, the dangerous kind. Jasmine flipped the next page, revealing a donor list. One name circled in red. This man, she said, tapping the ink, is currently under federal investigation for transporting minors across state lines for events. She didn't use the word trafficking. She didn't need to. The room heard it anyway. A few in the gallery visibly recoiled. A gasp. A dropped pen. Even Green looked momentarily paralyzed, her notes abandoned mid-scribble. Johnson shifted eyes, darting not toward the evidence, but to the exit. Jasmine straightened her papers slowly. So when you say Ark Encounter, she said, tone flat as stone, you're not talking about salvation. You're talking about cover. Her voice lowered. Maybe the Ark wasn't built to save what was pure. Maybe it was just another vault, to hide what should never have survived. Because when you fund silence with faith, what does that Ark really carry inside? Jasmine stepped forward, voice steady, eyes locked on the speaker's chair. I move to subpoena all staff communications tied to the Epstein vote delay. Every memo, every email, every message sent or received within Johnson's office in the last 60 days. Her tone didn't ask. It carved. The chamber froze. Johnson slammed the gavel. Out of order, he snapped the wood, echoing louder than he expected, like it struck something hollow. Jasmine didn't flinch. Then so is your conscience, she said, voice cutting through the tension like glass through velvet. Cameras panned in. The red tally lights blinked like sirens. Matt Gates stood. No one moved. No one breathed. I vote with her. It landed like a bomb. One syllable at a time. Even Green turned eyes wide as if watching gravity invert in real time. But then she stood too fast, abrupt like a siren, flaring mid-silence. You don't get to hijack this chamber for a circus, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Snapped, her voice, rising, eyes fixed on Jasmine. You think a few dramatics and a name drop makes you the voice of justice? Jasmine didn't blink. She turned calm as a trigger pulled mid-breath. I think silence has killed more girls than you've ever defended, and I think your outrage says more about who you're protecting than what you believe. Green scoffed, stepped forward closer than protocol preferred. You're weaponizing trauma. Jasmine leaned in, voice low. No, I'm just refusing to let it die quietly. The room froze. Gotts folded his arms, glancing between them. This isn't weaponized trauma, he muttered. It's accountability. And some of us are done dodging it. Because the floor didn't give way with fire or fury. It collapsed with one sentence from one of their own. But it cracked wide open when Jasmine stared her loudest critic straight in the face and didn't blink. Who else is about to cross the aisle? And what secret are they flipping to protect Jasmine, signaled to the back of the chamber? The doors opened, not with ceremony, but like the end of a trial. A man in a gray suit stepped forward, slow and unshaking. His badge no longer clipped to his belt, just the quiet weight of what he'd carried too long. Name, the chair asked. He spoke into the mic. Special Agent Robert Marin, FBI, retired. Marin opened a single folder worn at the spine. In 2016, he began We Had a File. It came through a back-channel tip, corroborated. The name flagged on page 1, initials only. But unmistakable. DJT. The room stilled like it had been dropped underwater. We sealed it under direct order from DOJ. I wasn't allowed to reopen it. I wasn't even allowed to speak of it until today. Johnson's face whitened. Gates stared ahead motionless. Green mouthed a curse without sound. Jasmine stepped beside the witness table, calm but electric. So the Department of Justice sealed a file that tied the man running for president to the most notorious trafficker in modern American history. Marin nodded. Once, sharp, final. A rustle moved through the gallery like wind before a storm. Staffers looked at each other, some horrified, some already reaching for their phones. Jasmine didn't blink. She placed her hand on the folder as if touching a live wire. What's the cost of one sealed folder? When opening it might have changed the history of the free world. Jasmine opened a smaller folder. No exhibits, no spreadsheets, just letters. Worn creased handwritten. She read the first slowly, her voice quieter now, like it belonged to someone else. Dear Congress, I was 14. No one believed me. I told a teacher. He told me to be quiet or I'd be taken. Jasmine paused. She was deported 2 weeks later. She turned the page. Another wrote, I kept a journal. When I turned 16, I tried to hand it to a man in a suit after an event. He looked me in the eye and threw it in a trash can. Her hand trembled slightly. She took her own life 6 months later. The last letter was typed, neat, cold. I held a sign at a Trump rally in 2019. It said, Epstein knew everything. I was removed before the cameras started rolling. Jasmine folded the page and laid it down like a nameplate. The silence wasn't polite. It was broken, crushed, like something sacred had been stepped on, and no one dared sweep it up. She looked around the room, her voice steel again. They screamed, they testified, they begged, but none of it made it past the mic check. The red lights on the cameras blinked quietly. They were still live, and somewhere someone who had written one of those letters was watching. How many cries for help never even made it to the airwaves? Because someone decided they didn't match the script, Jasmine reached for the remote and pressed play. The chamber lights dimmed just enough for the projection to sharpen. Grainy footage filled the screen. 2002, a familiar gold and marble backdrop, laughter in the air. Donald Trump stood beside Epstein at a private event, holding court like a game show host. The host asked about Epstein. Trump smiled. He likes them young, he said, eyes twinkling. Real young. Laughter erupted on the tape. Polished shoes, expensive suits, applause. Jasmine let it run 5 seconds longer than anyone wanted to watch. Then she cut the feed. The sound died, but the echo didn't. She didn't speak right away. She turned to the chamber, then to the cameras, looking not at Johnson, not at Green, but into the lens. Straight into living rooms across America. We laughed, then she said softly. We laughed because we thought it was just a joke. Because power wears a smile. Because cruelty often does. Her voice lowered. And now, we bury what we didn't want to believe. We redact it. We vote it down. We seal it. We delay it. No one moved. No one blinked. Johnson sat like a man watching the bottom fall out of a floor he built himself. Jasmine placed the remote beside the letters. This isn't just about what he said, she whispered. It's about how easy it was to say it and how easy we made it for him to walk away. What if the nation never laughed again? Because this time we finally listened. Jasmine stood tall, the weight of the chamber pressing against her spine, and raised her hand. I move for a full vote right here, right now, to unseal the Epstein files and release all related communications from Speaker Johnson's office. Her words didn't echo. They struck. Like glass cracking beneath boots, no one had the courage to stop. The room shifted. 9 Republicans rose in silence and walked out, heels clicking like a slow retreat from a battlefield too hot to claim. 5 Democrats followed, not in protest, but in fear, heads low, eyes avoiding every camera lens trained on their backs. No one spoke. The silence said enough. Johnson leaned forward, his voice a dry whisper meant for her alone. You'd split the House for this. His tone wasn't angry. It was weary, almost pleading. A man watching the walls he helped paint start to blister in real time. Jasmine didn't blink. I'd split the whole country if it means saving the truth. The line didn't echo in the chamber. It echoed across phones, feeds, and televisions, already tuned in, already choosing sides. The gavel stayed still. The speaker no longer moved. Because when a fire is this deep, the house doesn't fall quietly. How do you save a house that's on fire? When everyone inside insists the smoke is just politics? As the chamber braced for the vote, a lone C-SPAN camera panned across the speaker's bench, slow, unintentional, mechanical. It caught Johnson leaning in just slightly lips tight to a GOP aide's ear. No mic caught it clearly, but the boom operator caught enough. 6 words, whispered like a last confession. If her next file has the name, we're done. That was all it took. Within seconds, the clip hit Twitter. Slowed down, subtitled, memed. What name flooded the feed in every possible tone, curious, angry, terrified. Some guessed, some knew, some just stared at the still image frozen on Johnson's clenched jaw like it held the end of something too big to name. Jasmine didn't smile. Her hand rested on one last file, unopened, untouched, waiting like a detonator. But her hand rested on one last file in front of her, unopened, untouched, waiting like a detonator no one had dared test. The vote hadn't been called yet, but the country already had. Because some names you say to seek justice, and some you bury to stay alive. What's the one name even Congress won't say out loud? Because they know the second it's spoken, everything burns. The clerk read the final tally with a breath that barely held. Ayes 218, nays 217. The chamber didn't cheer. It didn't erupt. It just stopped, like time froze between 2 heartbeats. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She just nodded once, sharp, small, like a soldier, confirming the breach. Johnson's hand hovered over the gavel longer than it should have. When it fell, it didn't just strike wood. It cracked something deeper. The chamber floor vibrated, the air shifted. Reporters held their breath. A sound like thunder in a room not built for storms. The vote had passed. The files would be unsealed. 1 vote, 1 inch. 1 woman against a machine built to forget her. Jasmine stood still, her hand finally resting on the last folder. The red seal on the corner already broken. Not opened. Just waiting. The weight of it was no longer legal, it was biblical. Johnson didn't look at her. Couldn't. Around him, phones lit up like fireflies. Security whispered. Staffers stood. History had already started moving. Because the vote was done. The walls had cracked. The records would come. And when they did, America wouldn't be the same. Now that the vault is open, whose name will be the first to crawl into the light? The seal broke with a flick of Jasmine's hand. No ceremony, no preamble. Just a single page slid from the folder like a blade unsheathed. The chamber leaned forward as the names began. First, Richard D. McCaffrey, a billionaire donor, known, powerful, unprosecuted. Second, Judge Malcolm Reeves, federal bench, lifetime appointment. The room shifted. Third, redacted, not for public release. Not yet. The silence screamed. Then came the fourth. Donald John Trump. The name didn't echo. It detonated. For a second, the air itself seemed to glitch. C-SPAN's audio crackled. The feed stalled. The screen pixelated before snapping back into motion, too late to stop what everyone had already heard. Gasps weren't dramatic. They were real. One lawmaker stood without knowing why. Another dropped a pen. Across the country, televisions paused mid-frame live streams, replayed in real-time captions, failed to keep up. Jasmine let the name hang, unsanitized. It had been printed in ink, spoken into record, burned into history, no longer coded, just there. What happens when the most powerful name in America is no longer untouchable and the whole world hears it spoken aloud? The chamber was no longer a battlefield. It was a crater. The vote had passed. The names were out. The air felt scorched, too heavy to speak into, too sacred to break. And yet Jasmine stood, not triumphant, not victorious, just present, like someone who'd survived the fire and still chose to walk back in. She didn't look at Johnson, didn't glance at the empty chairs where 9 had fled. Her eyes went to the one place that still held power, the camera, the lens, the country. Millions watching, some angry, some stunned, some holding their children a little closer. I didn't do this for revenge, she said, voice clear but not cold. I did this because silence isn't neutral. It's not safety. It's a shield if you're the one hiding behind it. But for the rest of us, it's a weapon, and too many have bled because of it. She stepped back, but the weight of her words didn't move. I didn't come to destroy, she said. I came to make sure no one gets buried by silence again. The chamber said nothing. But across the country, something shifted. If the truth could survive this day, what else might still be saved? The cameras stayed on as Jasmine walked out, not cheered, not saluted. Outside, the Capitol steps were lined not with reporters, but with faces, mothers, daughters, survivors holding signs not of slogans, but of names. Some handwritten, some printed, some framed in trembling hands. Across the country, flags dipped to half-mast, not by order, but by instinct. In cities and quiet towns, candles were lit beneath billboards, showing photos no one had dared display a year ago. Names once redacted were now written in ink, in chalk, in permanent marker on every sidewalk where memory refused to be erased. Jasmine didn't wave. She didn't look back. She walked through the crowd like someone carrying both a burden and a promise never claimed, never dropped. Not a victor, a witness. The only kind history ever listens to in the end. And above it all, the narrator's voice broke through like a breath after silence. America doesn't forget its heroes, but it often forgets its daughters. Today, one daughter made us remember, because sometimes the loudest sound in a nation isn't protest, or applause, or even a gavel. Sometimes the loudest sound is the name you dare to say out loud. Beneath the weight of power, there are names that were never meant to be remembered, and yet when one voice dares to speak, the silence breaks for everyone. This story wasn't about revenge or victory. It was about refusing to let fear dictate who gets forgotten. And in that refusal, something changed, not just in Congress, but in all of us watching. If you've ever stayed silent when you knew the truth mattered, this is your moment to speak. Share your thoughts below, because what you say today might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this story stirred something in you, don't just scroll past it. Like, share and subscribe to Hill Insights, where no truth stays buried and silence never wins. Hit the bell, because the next name we uncover could change everything. What moment made you pause, made you feel, made you remember? Tell us in the comments. Because this time your voice doesn't echo into silence, it echoes into history. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. Truth isn't over. It's just waiting for someone to hear it.